So this is another stage in the assembly process. The guitar's been built, it's been bound, and you can see that it's built without the head on it. It's a peculiar process for building that elevated fingerboard. Kind of a convoluted thing, but this is the elevation of the fingerboard, or the elevation that holds the fingerboard, and it's being attached right now. So that's part of the part of the complication of making an elevated fingerboard. The head itself will then, after this comes off, this piece gets fitted on and spliced onto the point of the V-joint. You can see it also right here. This is just the heel being glued up, and the elevation is actually this part right here, but it's built separately. The guitar is built without the elevated segment, but then later on this gets fitted on like this. And then, you know, all of the shape and the rollers and the drilling and all of that shaping goes on later. So it's a fairly convoluted process to get to that. That's part of why the signature is more expensive than performance. Now if you look over there, this is a performance model that is just getting the fingerboard glued on. So it's kind of a similar process. The guitar is built, the binding is all done. In this case you can see that the head was already done. It was done separately before putting the neck together, because this neck is assembled in a very different way. So this is just the fingerboard getting glued on now. It happens after the binding's done, after the body's all done, and you can see, you know, the neck is still all gross and square. It's not carved before. So this is the sub-assembly of a neck. It's the part that's just made, and from here you just do a rough carving of the heel, but then as the instrument's built, it's built on a workboard, and the sides plug in here, and the neck just still stays all chunky like this until after the fingerboard's on. Once the fingerboard's on, then you just go ahead and carve it down, and the carving is all done by hand with draw knives and chisels and rasps and sanding blocks. So still really old school on this. You know, there's some people think it would be easier to carve it when it's at this stage, to carve the neck, but it turns out it really isn't. If you had a CNC to do some of the carving, that would be nice, it would be handy, but it's still, after the fingerboard's glued on, that's when it gets taken down to the real final dimensions. Now the final dimensions, you know, so here's one that's just really, it's getting right ready for finish, and you know, these dimensions, this shape, all of this is very important. It's very important to what the guitar is like when it's done. It's amazing how much, you know, you think of playability as being the string height above the frets, but to me also playability is how your thumb tracks on the back of the neck. It's really an important issue. So the dimensions here and the way this is shaped all go into the beauty of the feel and the just friendly playability of it. So, you know, we just do it. There's no templates or machines that take it to this. It's just done with chisels, knives, and rasps and files, and the builder gets the feel. You know, you get to learn that, and I'm very attached to that feeling. When I first was making guitars, when I'd work all by myself, what I would do is I'd actually string the guitar up before putting the finish on it. And I would take it to a gig. I'd go play at a restaurant or a cafe with it in the raw, and I'd play it for a couple hours, 2-3 hours, and I'd say, well, that's pretty good, but maybe it's not quite right. And then I'd go back to the workshop the next day and continue with the strings still on it, carving until I got it so that it would just say, ah, that's what I want it to feel like. And so now the deal is to be able to pass that feeling on to every guitar, even though it's not being carved with the strings on it. Doing it that way is not good in the finishing process, obviously. Later on, having to finish it after it's strung up with the bridge on, that's kind of a messy job, and not the way we want to do it. But that was how I developed the feel of a neck, is by carving and playing and carving until I got it right. So this is where the real skill comes in. I mean, skill comes in all along, but I think most people probably figure it's some sort of machine that does this. And in some companies it is some sort of machine, but in this case it owns the machine. And, you know, it takes sharp tools, a good eye, and practice to get this down. But it's so beautiful. You know, the lines are so beautiful, and, you know, the wood smells good, and if he's lucky, he doesn't cut himself.
Yeah, especially on camera.
Yeah. This knife that Owen's using is really a particular Mexican-style knife. In Paracho, where I worked for many years, they use this for all kinds of things, not just for carving. They cut out the shape of the instrument. They'll cut out the channel for the rosette. You know, trim all the braces, do all the carving, all of that stuff with these knives. And because this shop has had, and everybody makes their own, because we've had so many really fine Mexican builders come through this shop from, you know, the acquaintances that I made while I was working in Mexico, that there's been a lot of rub-off from that really kind of 19th century style of working, very, very traditional way of doing it, but a lot of that has rubbed off on our processes here. And you know, I feel really lucky to have been exposed to that kind of, I don't know, really just organic working style. I just love that. It's amazing, you know. And see, that's going here, and it doesn't take that long. And so he knows what this is, and he can just get there. He knows how to get there.
Still fat right now, so
yeah.
I'm going to put the topography on the fretboard, and then.
Yeah, see, that's the thing, and you're talking about the relief. What he'll do is get it rough like this, so removing most of the material, but until you get and start looking at exactly what the neck angle is with the fingerboard and how it's going to line up with the bridge, you can't do the final thicknessing until the fingerboard is finally configured right. And so there's a little bit of room to be able to adjust the height of, you know, the neck angle, the projection of that fretboard and where it's going to hit the bridge, that line of sight. And so actually it's going to do that now.
Kenny, again, as we had discussed earlier, you know, your guitars are really very easy to play, and I know that a lot of that has to do with the setup, and you start working on that setup long before you actually have strings on, and you're kind of posturing yourself for that with some operations. Can you explain to us exactly what goes on here?
You know, it's funny, when I think about making the guitar, it's in a way you start with the string, and under the string you put a bridge and a nut, and under the string you put the frets. Under the frets is the fingerboard. Under the fingerboard is the neck and the rest of the body. But it starts with the string. So as you said, posturing it or getting set up for it, you know, the work that you do before fretting it is really important to get to I don't know, to get it so that the fingerboard relates to the way the strings behave. The nylon strings, that is the plain unwound strings, are pretty stiff. They kind of have a movement like that, but the bass strings are floppier, and they have more movement like this. So they behave differently. Now, when you're preparing the fingerboard, the ideal outcome is that on the treble side, for the first 3 strings, it's pretty much straight, just a straight line, maybe a little bit of curve. And on the bass side, there's a few thousandths of relief. We can look in a little while at a finished guitar and maybe be able to show that a little bit better. But here, before fretting it, you try to establish that relationship so that there's a little bit of curve on the bass side and pretty much straight on the treble side. So it's a little geography. It's like almost like a water flow, That is, there's a like you would do a cement driveway or something to get the flow right. But so you go for that. Now, it matters how the fingerboard lines up with where the bridge is going to be. That's really important, and very important. And so at this point, he can do something about that. And it's the last chance you get to adjust for it. While you're building the instrument and gluing the neck on and gluing the fingerboard on, you're always trying to hit that target, but this is the last time to make a little adjustment in it. And it can be done by hand, with a plane, with a sanding block. We've got this little machine if you need to do it, if it needs more work. It's kind of a crazy Rube Goldberg machine, but it works. There he's checking the bridge height. There it's looking for straight just on the treble. So this is the arc, and he was using the same block that he'll do it on and just using this to kind of, so it'll be slippery. So it's the same block that then he'll go back over the fingerboard with this, and as you can see, it's a little arch, not nearly as much as you put on a steel string, but a little bit of radius. And that's, while traditionally classical fingerboards have been dead flat, and probably somebody plays this one, they say, oh, that's a flat fingerboard, but it's not. It's got this little tiny radius, and that's one of those little recipe elements that goes into the playability of it.